The morning light from 3 different suns painted the sky of Kepler 7b in colors that no human eye had ever seen. Purple mixed with gold and green as the massive space station that housed the Galactic Academy of Civilizations slowly rotated above the moon's surface. Inside the Academy's main library, students from dozens of different worlds sat quietly at their study tables, each one looking completely different from the others. Zarath ran one of her 4 crystalline hands through the data files floating in front of her. Her skin sparkled like cut diamonds as she moved, and her large black eyes reflected the holographic information that danced in the air. She was a Veldarian, and like all of her people, she had a memory that could hold every detail she had ever seen or heard. This made her very good at studying the history of different civilizations, which was exactly what she was doing now. "This doesn't make sense," she said to her study partners, her voice sounding like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Look at these numbers." Keth, who looked like a cloud of purple and blue gas contained in a clear environmental suit, floated closer to see what she was pointing at. When he got excited or confused, his colors changed, and right now he was shifting between deep blue and bright yellow. He communicated by changing colors and patterns, which a translator device turned into words that others could understand. "What is wrong with the data?" his translator asked in a calm, computer-generated voice. The third member of their group, Rixtar, clicked his mandibles together in thought. He was a Chithari, which meant he looked somewhat like a giant insect with 6 arms and compound eyes that saw in all directions at once. His people shared thoughts with each other through a mental connection. But he could also speak normally when he needed to talk to other species. "Show us what you found," Rixtar said, his voice buzzing slightly like all Chithari voices did. Zarath pulled up a large chart that showed the development timeline of every civilization that had achieved what the Academy called ascendant status. This was a special classification given to species that had grown beyond their home planets and become major powers in the galaxy. It was like graduating from a planetary civilization to a galactic one. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a line on the chart that was much shorter than all the others. Every other civilization took between 50,000 and 200,000 years to reach ascendant status. The Zelrani Empire, which held the previous record, took 31,000 years. But humans did it in less than 3,000 years. Keth's colors shifted to a shocked white and silver. "That cannot be correct. The data must be wrong. I checked it 3 times, Zarath replied. "And look at this part." She zoomed in on the human timeline. For most of their development, they were progressing at a normal rate. Then, in just the last 200 years, their technology exploded forward. They went from using primitive combustion engines to building faster-than-light spacecraft in less time than it takes most species to develop better farming techniques. Rixtar's 6 arms moved in different directions as he pulled up additional data files. According to this, humans were still using animal-powered transportation when the Alteran Confederacy was already exploring other star systems. But now, humans have colonies in 47 different solar systems, and they have defensive agreements with species that are much older and more advanced than they are. The 3 students stared at the information in front of them. In the academy, they had learned about hundreds of different civilizations, and they all followed similar patterns. Species would develop slowly, learn to use tools, discover fire, develop agriculture, create cities, then very gradually work their way up to space travel over tens of thousands of years. The smart ones survived, the aggressive ones conquered, their neighbors and the peaceful ones formed alliances. But it always took a very long time. Humans seem to have broken every rule. "Maybe they had help," Keith suggested, his colors now showing curiosity with swirls of green and purple. "Perhaps an older civilization gave them technology." "I thought of that too," Zarath said. "But there's no record of any major contact between humans and advanced civilizations until after they had already developed most of their technology. The first official contact was only 500 years ago, and by then they were already building starships." Rixtar clicked his mandibles again, which was something he did when he was thinking hard. "What about their planet? Maybe Earth had special resources that made development easier?" Zarath pulled up another file. Earth is actually a fairly harsh planet compared to most worlds that develop intelligent life. It has extreme weather, natural disasters, and it went through several ice ages that should have slowed development, not speeded it up. The three friends sat in silence for a moment, each one trying to understand what they were seeing. Around them, other students continued their own research, but none of them seemed to be having the same problem. "There's something else," Zarath said quietly. "I tried to access the complete historical records for humanity, but there are gaps, large gaps, especially during the period when their technology was developing fastest." "What kind of gaps?" Rixtar asked. "Entire decades where there are almost no records, and some of the records that do exist contradict each other. It's like someone deliberately removed information or changed it." Keth's colors shifted to a worried orange. "Why would someone do that?" "I don't know," Zarath admitted. "But I think we should find out." At that moment, a large shadow fell across their study table. The three students looked up to see Dr. Helminth, their professor, standing beside them. Dr. Helminth was a gastropod, which meant he looked like a giant slug, but he was one of the most respected historians in the academy. He had been alive for over 12,000 years and had personally witnessed the rise of dozens of civilizations. "I see you have discovered the human anomaly," Dr. Helminth said in his slow, careful voice. "This is not unusual. Most students who study comparative civilization development eventually notice the irregularities in the human timeline." "Professor," Zarath said, "can you explain why their development was so different?" Dr. Helminth's eye stalks moved independently as he considered the question. "That is a very complex question, young Zarath. The official explanation is that humans are simply a very adaptable species who were fortunate enough to avoid the major catastrophes that slowed down most civilizations." "But you don't believe that, do you?" Rixtar asked. His compound eyes could see micro-expressions that other species missed, and he could tell that Dr. Helminth was not telling them everything. "What I believe is not important," the professor replied. "What matters is what can be proven with evidence, and the evidence we have access to suggests that humans developed very quickly, due to a combination of factors that are not fully understood." Keth's colors showed frustration. "Are you saying that no one knows how humans advance so quickly?" I'm saying that the complete answer to that question is beyond the scope of what we teach in basic civilization studies," Dr. Helminth said carefully. "Perhaps if you are truly interested in this mystery, you should consider doing independent research. The Academy has extensive archives that might contain more detailed information." With that, the old professor slithered away, leaving the three students with more questions than answers. "He knows something," Zarath said once Dr. Helminth was out of hearing range. "Definitely," Rixtar agreed. "And he wants us to find it ourselves." Keth's colors shifted to determined red and gold. "Then, that's exactly what we're going to do." 3 days later, Zarath and her friends found themselves standing in front of a massive door marked with symbols that meant restricted access, faculty only. The door was made of some kind of metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and it had no visible handle or keypad. "Are you sure about this?" Keth asked, his gaseous form shifting nervously between pale yellow and gray. "We could get in serious trouble for being here." "We won't get caught," Rixtar said confidently. "I've been monitoring the patrol schedules for the past week. The security guards don't come to this level for another 2 hours." Zarath pressed her hand against a small panel beside the door. Her crystalline fingers began to glow as she used a technique that most people didn't know Veldarians could do. Her people could interface directly with computer systems by matching their internal energy patterns to electronic frequencies. It was not exactly legal to use this ability without permission, but it was not exactly illegal either, since most species didn't even know it was possible. The door slid open silently. "How did you do that?" Keth whispered. "I'll explain later," Zarath said. "Right now we need to find those archives." The three students stepped into a corridor that stretched further than they could see. The walls were lined with data storage units that glowed softly in the darkness. Each unit contained thousands of years of historical records from civilizations across the galaxy. Somewhere in this vast collection was the information they needed. The human files should be in Section 7, Rickstar said, reading from a small device he had borrowed from the Academy's computer system. This way. They walked for nearly 20 minutes before reaching the right section. The human records filled an entire wall, which was surprising since humans had only been known to the galaxy for 500 years. Most species that young had maybe a few dozen data units. Humans had hundreds. There are so many, Keth observed, his colors showing amazement. Too many, Zarath agreed. Why would there be so much information about such a young species? Rickstar was already accessing one of the data units. Look at this, he said. These are the first contact reports from when the Galactic Council discovered humans. A holographic display appeared in front of them, showing the image of a blue and green planet orbiting a yellow star. The recording was narrated by a counselor whose species Zarath didn't recognize. Initial survey of System Sol 3 reveals a carbon-based species in early technological development, the voice said. Species designation, human. Current technology level suggests they are approximately 2,000 years away from achieving space flight capability. Recommendation: monitor but do not make contact until they develop faster than light travel. That was 500 years ago, Zarath said. But humans already had spaceflight by then. Rickstar pulled up another file. This one dated 50 years later. The tone of the report was very different. Urgent update on species designation human, a different voice said. Previous estimates were incorrect. Humans have achieved spaceflight and have established colonies on 2 planets in their home system. Their rate of technological advancement is unprecedented. Recommend immediate contact protocols. The next file was even more surprising. It showed footage of human spacecraft that looked far more advanced than anything the Galactic Council had expected to see. This is impossible, Keth said, his form flickering with confused colors. They went from primitive technology to advanced spaceflight in 50 years? It gets worse, Rickstar said, pulling up more recent files. Look at this military analysis from the Human-Krillian War. The holographic display changed to show a tactical map of a star system. Red dots represented Krillian ships, while blue dots showed human vessels. The human ships were outnumbered 10-1. The Krillian Empire has 17 conquered systems and has never lost a major conflict, the military analyst explained. Human forces consist of approximately 50,000 personnel with limited combat experience. Predicted outcome: Krillian victory within 6 months. Zarath watched as the tactical display showed the beginning of the war. The Krillian ships moved in standard attack formations that had been used successfully for thousands of years. The human ships seemed to scatter randomly with no apparent strategy. This looks like it's going to be a massacre, she said. But as the simulation continued, something strange happened. The scattered human ships began working together in ways that the tactical computer couldn't predict. They used hit-and-run attacks, set traps, and somehow managed to turn the Krillian formations against each other. Final outcome, the analyst said, his voice showing disbelief. Krillian forces surrendered after 4 months. Human casualties, minimal. Krillian casualties, 60% of total forces. How? Keth asked. How did they do that? Rickstar accessed another file. According to this, the humans use something called adaptive tactics. They changed their strategy every few days, sometimes every few hours. The Krillians couldn't predict what they would do next because they kept doing things that made no sense according to standard military doctrine. But that's not how warfare works, Zarath said. You can't just make up new tactics in the middle of a battle. Military strategy is based on thousands of years of proven methods. Apparently humans didn't get that message, Rickstar replied. They continued searching through the files, and each new piece of information made the mystery deeper. Humans had solved scientific problems that had puzzled other species for centuries. They had formed alliances with species that had been enemies for thousands of years. They had developed technologies that other civilizations had declared impossible. Look at this, Zarath said, pulling up a file about human diplomacy. The Alterans and the Zephyrians have been at war for 3,000 years. Everyone knows they hate each other. But according to this, humans got them to sign a peace treaty in 6 months. How? The human diplomat apparently asked them why they were fighting. When they explained their historical grievances, she asked if those grievances were more important than the benefits of working together. Then she showed them a plan for a joint colony that would benefit both species. Keth's colors shifted to skeptical orange. That's it? She just asked them to stop fighting? According to this report, she said that continuing the war was a waste of time and resources that could be better used for exploration and development. The Alterans and Zephyrians had never thought of it that way before. Rickstar found another file that made them all stop talking. It was labeled Psychological Profile Human Species Classified. This one is restricted, he said. I can't access it without higher clearance. Let me try, Zareth said. She placed her hand on the access panel and concentrated. Her crystalline skin glowed brighter as she tried to match the security frequency. After a few moments, the file opened. Warning, a voice said. This file contains sensitive information about human psychological patterns. Access is restricted to senior council members and authorized researchers only. The file began with a simple statement that made all 3 students feel a chill. Subject: Human Species Psychological Evaluation. Conclusion: Humans do not recognize the concept of impossibility in the same way as other known species. Where other civilizations see insurmountable obstacles, humans see problems to be solved. This fundamental difference in perception may explain their rapid advancement and unusual success in conflicts with more established species. They don't believe in impossible, Zareth whispered. But that's crazy, Keth said. Some things are impossible. That's just reality. Is it? Rickstar asked. Think about everything we've seen. Humans do things that should be impossible and they succeed. Maybe the problem isn't that they're crazy. Maybe the problem is that everyone else has been thinking too small. At that moment, they heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Someone was coming. We need to go, Zareth said quickly. Now. They grabbed as much data as they could carry and ran toward the exit. Behind them, they heard voices getting closer. Did you copy everything? Rickstar asked as they reached the door. Most of it, Zareth replied. But there's more. Much more. And I think someone doesn't want us to find it. Why would anyone want to hide information about humans? Keth asked. I don't know, Zareth said as they slipped back into the main corridor. But I think we're about to find out. As they walked back to their dormitory, trying to look casual, none of them noticed the figure watching them from the shadows. Lieutenant. Commander Jake Morrison had been stationed at the academy for 2 years, and he had been waiting for students to start asking the right questions about humanity. It looked like the wait was finally over. The next morning, Zareth couldn't concentrate on her regular classes. Her mind kept returning to what they had discovered in the archives. The information about humans made no sense according to everything she had learned about how civilizations developed. During lunch break, she met with Keth and Rickstar at their usual table in the academy's main cafeteria. I've been thinking about that psychological report, she said quietly, making sure no other students could hear them. If humans really don't understand that some things are impossible, then maybe that's why they can do impossible things. Keth's colors swirled nervously. But that still doesn't explain how they do it. You can believe you can fly all you want, but that doesn't mean you'll actually be able to fly. Unless you build a flying machine, Rickstar pointed out. Maybe that's what humans do. Instead of accepting that something can't be done, they find a way to do it. But some of the things they've accomplished shouldn't be possible even with that attitude, Zareth said. Like that war with the Krillians. Being positive doesn't make you bulletproof. As they talked, Zareth noticed something strange. Her personal communication device was picking up signals that shouldn't have been there. As a Veldarian, she was naturally sensitive to electronic frequencies, and she could detect transmissions that weren't meant for general reception. There's something going on, she whispered to her friends. I'm detecting encrypted communications coming from somewhere in the academy. What kind of communications? Rickstar asked. Zareth closed her eyes and focused on the signals. Her crystalline skin began to glow faintly as she tuned into the frequency. It's some kind of military channel. Multiple species are involved and they're talking about humans. Can you understand what they're saying? Keth asked, his form flickering with excitement and worry. It's heavily encrypted, but I can pick up some words. They're talking about something called Project Prometheus, and they keep mentioning threat assessment and containment protocols. Rickstar's compound eyes widened. Containment? They want to contain humans? I think so. And there's more. They're talking about missing agents and compromised operations. Over the next few days, Zareth continued to monitor the encrypted communications whenever she could. What she learned made her more confused and worried. It seemed like several major galactic powers were secretly working together to study humanity, but their efforts were not going well. "Listen to this," she told her friends one evening as they sat in her dormitory room. She had managed to decode part of a conversation between what sounded like an Alteran military commander and a representative from the Synthetic Collective. "Agent Keltar has not reported in for 6 weeks, the Alteran voice said. His last transmission indicated that he had successfully infiltrated human space and was beginning surveillance of their military installations. Same problem with our operative, the synthetic voice replied with its characteristic electronic tone. Unit designation Theta 7 was sent to observe human technology development. Last report stated that humans had offered it a position in their research department. Offered it a job? The Alteran sounded confused. Why would they do that? Unknown. Theta 7's final message said that humans were surprisingly welcoming, and that their technology was more advanced than anticipated. No further contact has been established. This is the third operative we've lost this year, the Alteran continued. Either humans have incredibly sophisticated counterintelligence capabilities, or something else is happening to our agents. Zareth paused the recording. Do you understand what this means? Multiple species are sending spies to study humans, and the spies are disappearing. Maybe humans are capturing them, Keth suggested. But that doesn't make sense, Rickstar said. If humans were capturing foreign agents, it would cause diplomatic incidents. The Galactic Council would know about it. What if the spies aren't being captured? Zareth asked. What if they're choosing to stay? This idea was so strange that none of them spoke for a moment. The concept of an intelligence agent voluntarily abandoning their mission was almost unthinkable. That's impossible, Keth finally said. Agents are trained to resist any kind of persuasion or bribery. They would never just switch sides, unless they found something that changed their mind about humans, Zareth said. Something that made them realize their original mission was wrong. She played another intercepted conversation, this one between two species she didn't recognize. The Siege of Titan base has been classified as a statistical anomaly, one voice said. 200 human Marines held off 50,000 Hierarch warriors for 3 weeks. The mathematical probability of this outcome is effectively 0. What do the survivors report? The other voice asked. That's the problem. The Hierarch survivors all tell the same story, but it doesn't make sense. They claim that the humans fought with perfect coordination, that they anticipated every attack, and that their tactics changed faster than the Hierarchs could adapt to them. Impossible. No species has that level of tactical flexibility. That's what we thought. But we've reviewed the battle recordings. The humans did things that violate basic principles of military strategy, and somehow it worked. Zareth turned off the recording. There's more like this. Dozens of incidents where humans did things that should have been impossible and succeeded every time. But how? Rickstar asked, frustrated. There has to be an explanation. Maybe there is, said a new voice from behind them. All 3 students spun around to see a human standing in the doorway of Zareth's room. He was tall and had dark hair and friendly eyes, and he was wearing the uniform of an Academy liaison officer. Zareth recognized him as Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, one of the human representatives stationed at the Academy. How long have you been there? She asked, her skin flickering with alarm. Long enough to hear you trying to solve the great mystery of human development, Jake said with a smile. And I have to say you're asking better questions than most of the professional intelligence agencies. Are you going to report us for accessing restricted files? Keth asked, his colors shifting to worried gray. Actually, I'm here to help, Jake said. Mind if I sit down? This conversation is long overdue." The three students looked at each other uncertainly, but Zareth gestured to an empty chair. Jake sat down and looked at each of them seriously. "You've discovered that multiple species are secretly studying humanity," he said. "You found evidence that we develop faster than we should, fight better than we should, and solve problems that others consider impossible. And you're wondering how we do it." "Yes," Zareth said simply. "The answer is both simpler and more complicated than you think," Jake continued. "But before I explain, I need to know something. What do you plan to do with this information once you have it?" "What do you mean?" Rixtar asked. "I mean, are you going to expose humanity as some kind of threat to galactic security? Are you going to publish papers about how dangerous we are? Or are you genuinely trying to understand us?" Zareth thought about this question. "We just want to understand the truth. We're students. Learning is what we do." Jake nodded slowly. "All right then. But what I'm about to tell you might change how you see not just humanity, but your own species as well. Are you sure you want to know?" The three friends looked at each other. They had come this far in their investigation, and they had already broken several academy rules. There was no point in stopping now. "Yes," Zareth said. "We want to know the truth." Jake smiled, but there was something sad in his expression. "Okay then, but we can't talk here. Tomorrow night, meet me in conference room 7 on level 15. That room is shielded against electronic surveillance and we won't be interrupted." "Why are you willing to help us?" Keth asked. Jake stood up to leave. "Because it's time," he said. "The galaxy is going to learn about humanity sooner or later. I'd rather it come from students who are asking the right questions than from intelligence agencies who are asking the wrong ones." After he left, the three students sat in silence for a long time. "Do you think we can trust him?" Rixtar finally asked. "I don't know," Zareth admitted. "But I think we're about to find out." The next evening, Zareth, Keth, and Rixtar made their way through the Academy's corridors to Conference Room 7. The room was located in a section of the station that most students never visited, and the hallways felt strangely quiet. When they reached the door, Jake Morrison was already waiting for them. "Thank you for coming," he said as he let them into the room. "What I'm about to tell you is not officially classified, but it's not something we advertise either." The conference room was larger than Zareth had expected, with a long table surrounded by chairs designed for different species. Jake gestured for them to sit down, then activated a device that made the walls shimmer slightly. "Privacy shield," he explained. "Now no one can listen to our conversation from outside." Jake sat down across from them and was quiet for a moment, as if he was deciding how to begin. "Let me start with a question," he finally said. "What do you think makes a species successful in the galaxy?" "Advanced technology," Rixtar answered immediately. "Military strength," Keth added, his colors showing confidence. "Intelligence and planning," Zareth said. Jake nodded. "Those are all good answers, and they're what most species focus on. But they're not what made humans successful." "Then what did?" Zareth asked. "First, let me tell you something that might shock you," Jake said. "Humans are not naturally superior to any other species in the galaxy. We're not smarter than Veldarians. We're not stronger than hierarchs, and we're not more technologically gifted than the synthetic collective." "But that can't be right," Keth protested. "We've seen the evidence. Humans accomplish things that other species can't." "That's true," Jake agreed, "but not because we're better at those things. We succeed because we approach problems differently than everyone else." Jake stood up and walked to a wall screen which lit up with an image of Earth. "This is our home planet," he said. "Does it look peaceful to you?" The students studied the image. Earth was beautiful, with blue oceans and white clouds, but there were signs of extreme weather systems and geographical instability. "It looks like a difficult place to live," Zareth observed. "Exactly. Earth is one of the most hostile planets that has ever produced intelligent life. We had ice ages that lasted for thousands of years, supervolcanoes that blocked out the sun, earthquakes, floods, droughts, and hurricanes. And we shared the planet with some of the most dangerous predators in the known galaxy. How did your species survive? Rickstar asked. By learning to adapt to anything, Jake said. Other species evolved on stable planets where the environment stayed mostly the same for millions of years. They learned to be very good at specific things. Humans evolved on a planet where the environment changed constantly, so we learned to be good at changing with it. The screen changed to show images of early human history. Primitive humans working together to hunt massive animals, building shelters in harsh climates and developing tools. We learned that when something seemed impossible, we had to find a way to do it anyway, because our survival depended on it, Jake continued. When the climate changed, we couldn't just die, we had to adapt. When predators threatened us, we couldn't just run away. We had to find ways to fight back or avoid them. When food became scarce, we had to learn new ways to find it. But that's just normal evolution, Keth said. All species have to adapt to survive. Not like this, Jake said. Most species adapt over thousands of generations through biological changes. Humans learned to adapt within a single generation through behavioral and technological changes. We became really good at looking at a problem and saying, okay, how do we solve this? Zarath was beginning to understand. So when humans encounter something that other species think is impossible, you don't see an impossible thing. You see a problem that needs to be solved. Exactly, Jake said with a smile. Take that war with the Krillians that you read about. The Krillians had superior numbers, better weapons, and thousands of years of military experience. Every other species in the galaxy would have looked at that situation and said, we can't win, so we should surrender or negotiate. But humans didn't do that, Rickstar said. No, we didn't. We looked at the situation and said, okay, they're stronger than us in a direct fight, so how do we win without fighting directly? And we used tactics that the Krillians had never seen before because we made them up as we went along. We turned their strengths against them and found ways to make our weaknesses irrelevant. The screen showed tactical diagrams from the human Krillian War, displaying the unconventional strategies that had led to human victory. The Krillians kept trying to predict what we would do next based on standard military doctrine, Jake explained. But we weren't using standard military doctrine. We were using whatever worked. That's why your agents keep disappearing, Zarath said suddenly. The spies that other species send to study you. Jake looked impressed. You figured that out faster than I expected. Yes, that's exactly what happens. They come expecting to find some secret weapon or hidden advantage. Instead, they find humans who are genuinely friendly and interested in sharing knowledge and working together. But why would that make them switch sides? Keth asked. Because most of them have never experienced that before, Jake said. In most galactic civilizations, relationships between species are based on competition, dominance, or mutual benefit. Humans approach other species with genuine curiosity and a desire to cooperate. That seems too simple, Rickstar said. Simple doesn't mean easy, Jake replied. Think about it from their perspective. An agent arrives expecting to infiltrate a hostile alien civilization. Instead, humans invite them to dinner, ask about their culture, offer to help with their mission, and suggest ways their species could work together. It's completely unexpected. Jake sat back down and looked at each of the students seriously. Here's the real secret about humanity's success, he said. We don't try to be better than other species. We try to help other species be better versions of themselves. What do you mean? Zarath asked. When we encountered the Alterans and Zephyrians who had been at war for 3,000 years, we didn't try to defeat them or force them to make peace. We asked them what they really wanted and then helped them figure out how to get it without fighting each other. And they had never thought of that approach before? Keth asked. No, because they were focused on winning the war rather than solving the underlying problem. Most species get locked into patterns of thinking that limit what they believe is possible. Humans ask, what if we tried something completely different? The room was quiet for a moment as the students processed this information. But there's something else you need to know, Jake said, his expression becoming more serious. Something that might be harder to accept. What? Zarath asked. Humanity's rapid advancement has created a problem for the rest of the galaxy. Not because we're dangerous, but because we're making other species feel inadequate. Jake brought up another display showing graphs and charts. Since humans joined the galactic community, the rate of innovation and problem-solving across all species has increased dramatically. But it's not because humans are doing all the work. It's because we're asking questions that inspire other species to think differently. That sounds like a good thing, Rickstar said. It is, mostly. But it's also destabilizing. Civilizations that have been stable for thousands of years are suddenly questioning their basic assumptions about what's possible. Some species are excited by this. Others are terrified. Is that why some species want to contain humanity? Zarath asked. Jake nodded. Some species would rather maintain the status quo than risk the uncertainty that comes with rapid change. They see humanity as a threat to galactic stability. Are they right? Keth asked. Jake was quiet for a long moment. That depends on how you define stability, he finally said. If stability means keeping things exactly as they are, then yes, humanity is a threat to that. But if stability means creating a galaxy where all species can thrive and grow, then humanity might be exactly what the galaxy needs. So what happens now? Zarath asked. Now you have to decide what you want to do with this knowledge, Jake said. You could report what you've learned and let the Academy officials handle it. You could try to expose the secret monitoring operations, or you could help us. Help you do what? Help prepare the galaxy for the truth, Jake said. Because sooner, or later, everyone is going to figure out what you've already discovered, and when that happens, we want to make sure they understand that humanity's goal isn't to replace other species or prove we're superior. Our goal is to help everyone reach their full potential. The three students looked at each other, each one thinking about what they had learned and what it meant for their future. 2 weeks after their meeting with Jake Morrison, Zarath found herself standing in front of the Galactic Academy's main council chamber. Through the large windows, she could see representatives from dozens of species gathering for an emergency session. Word had somehow leaked about the secret monitoring operations against humanity, and several major civilizations were demanding answers. Keth floated beside her, his gaseous form cycling through nervous colors. Are you sure we're doing the right thing? He asked for the 10th time that morning. I don't know, Zarath admitted. But I think Jake was right when he said the truth would come out eventually. At least this way we can help control how it comes out. Rickstar approached them from down the corridor, his 6 arms carrying several data tablets. I've finished compiling all the evidence we found, plus the additional information Jake gave us. Everything is here. Over the past 2 weeks, Jake had shared more secrets with them than Zarath had expected. He had shown them classified footage of human diplomatic missions, scientific breakthroughs, and cultural exchange programs. But most importantly, he had introduced them to other humans working at the Academy. Dr. Lisa Carter, a human anthropologist, had explained how humans studied other cultures not to exploit their weaknesses, but to understand their strengths. Engineer Danny Rodriguez had shown them human technology that was deliberately designed to be easily shared with other species. Commander Sarah Blake had revealed that many supposedly alien technological breakthroughs of the past century had actually been human innovations, quietly given to other species to help them advance. The hardest part about being human in the galaxy, Sarah had told them, is pretending to be less capable than we actually are. We have to be careful not to make other species feel inferior or threatened. Now, as the 3 students prepared to address the council, Zarath wondered if they were about to destroy that careful balance. The council chamber doors opened and Jake Morrison emerged. He was no longer wearing his Academy liaison uniform. Instead, he wore the formal dress of what Zarath now knew was called the Human Cultural Integration Corps. Are you ready? He asked them. As ready as we can be, Zarath replied. Remember, you don't have to do this. You could still change your minds. No, Rickstar said firmly. The galaxy deserves to know the truth. Jake smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. Come on, let's go make history. The council chamber was larger than any room Zarath had ever seen. Representatives from 47 different species sat in a massive circle, each delegation positioned according to their species status in the galactic hierarchy. At the center of the room stood a raised platform where speakers could address the entire assembly. Council President Velthar, an ancient being whose species had been part of the galactic community for over 100,000 years, called the session to order. We have gathered to address allegations that several member civilizations have been conducting unauthorized surveillance operations against the human species, President Velthar announced. We will hear testimony from various parties before making any decisions about how to proceed. The first speaker was Admiral Crixton of the Alterran Confederacy. He stood at the platform and spoke in the measured tones of a military professional. The Alterran Confederacy has indeed been monitoring human activities, he said. This monitoring was deemed necessary due to humanity's unprecedented rate of advancement and their unpredictable behavior in diplomatic and military situations. Murmurs arose from around the chamber. Several species shifted uncomfortably in their seats. We have lost contact with multiple intelligence operatives sent to study human civilization, Admiral Crixton continued. This pattern suggests either sophisticated counterintelligence capabilities or some form of subversion that we do not understand. Representative Zix of the Synthetic Collective was the next to speak. Our analysis confirms similar experiences. Human technological development follows no recognizable pattern, and their problem-solving methodologies appear to violate established principles of logical progression. As more speakers came forward, Zarath realized that nearly half the civilizations in the galaxy had been secretly studying humanity. The picture that emerged was of a galaxy-wide intelligence operation that had been going on for centuries, all focused on understanding how humans could be so successful when they seemed so ordinary. Finally, President Velthar called for Jake Morrison to speak. Jake walked to the center platform and looked around the chamber calmly. "Thank you for allowing me to address the council," he said. "I think it's time we cleared up some misunderstandings about humanity." "Before you speak," interrupted Senator Theklam of the Hierarch Empire, "we demand to know what happened to our missing agents. Did your species capture them? Are they being held prisoner?" Jake shook his head. "No, Senator, they're not prisoners. In fact, most of them are probably at work right now, contributing to projects that benefit their home worlds." "What do you mean?" President Velthar asked. "I mean that when your agents arrived in human space expecting to conduct secret surveillance, we offered them jobs instead. We showed them our research facilities, introduced them to our scientists, and asked if they wanted to collaborate on projects that could help both our species." The chamber erupted in confused voices. Several representatives stood up and began talking at once. "Order," President Velthar called. "Let the human finish speaking." Jake waited for the noise to die down. "The truth is, we've known about the surveillance operations from the beginning. We've known about the secret alliances formed to study us, and we've known about the concerns that some species have about our rapid development." "Then why didn't you object?" Admiral Crixton demanded. "Because we understood why you were worried," Jake replied. "We know that our success seems impossible based on how other civilizations have developed. We know that our methods don't match established patterns. And we know that rapid change can be frightening." President Velthar leaned forward. "Are you saying that humanity deliberately allowed itself to be spied upon?" "We're saying that we tried to turn espionage into cooperation," Jake said. "When your agents arrived expecting to find military secrets or hidden advantages, we showed them the truth. We showed them that humanity's success comes from asking different questions and trying solutions that others consider impossible." At that moment, President Velthar gestured toward the gallery where the students were sitting. "Council recognizes student Zarath of Veldar, who has requested permission to address this assembly." Zarath's crystalline skin flickered with nervousness as she made her way to the speaking platform. She had never addressed such an important gathering before, and she could feel the eyes of the galaxy's most powerful beings watching her. "Honored representatives," she began. "My friends and I have spent the past month investigating humanity's rapid ascension. What we discovered changed our understanding not just of humans, but of what's possible for all our species. She activated a holographic display showing the research they had compiled. Humans succeed because they refuse to accept that problems are unsolvable. When faced with obstacles that stop other species, they ask, how can we do this differently? Instead of why can't this be done? Keth and Rixtar joined her at the platform, each adding their own perspectives to the presentation. They explained how human adaptability, cooperation, and willingness to share knowledge had benefited every species they encountered. The question facing this council, Zareth concluded, is not whether humanity is a threat to galactic stability. The question is whether we're brave enough to learn from their example. When the presentation ended, the chamber was silent for a long moment. Finally, President Velthar spoke. This council will recess to consider what we have heard today. But, before we do, I have one question for the human representative. Yes, President? Jake replied. If humanity has been deliberately sharing its knowledge and helping other species advance, why has this been kept secret? Jake smiled. Because we wanted other species to feel proud of their own achievements. If a Veldarian scientist discovers a new propulsion system, it's better for Veldarian confidence if they believe they discovered it themselves, rather than knowing it was based on human research shared through back channels. You've been secretly helping us advance while letting us take credit for the discoveries? Senator Theklam asked, sounding amazed. We've been doing what we've always done, Jake said. Trying to solve problems. And one of the biggest problems in the galaxy was the risk that our rapid advancement would make other species feel inferior or threatened. So we found a way to share our progress while preserving everyone's dignity. As the council session ended and representatives began filing, Zareth felt a sense of satisfaction. The truth was finally out in the open, and the galaxy would have to decide how to respond. Jake approached her as she left the speaking platform. Thank you, he said. You did something today that will change the galaxy forever. I hope it changes. It for the better, Zareth replied. It will, Jake assured her. Because now that everyone knows the truth, we can stop pretending and start really working together, and that's going to make all of us stronger. Looking around at the diverse group of beings leaving the chamber,